Hello and welcome back to yet another episode of Podcasting is Praxis. David's not around today because he is still suffering from some form of lurgy. So you're stuck with me. Hi, I'm Rob. My pronouns are he and him.
I'm Alistair. My pronouns are he and him.
I'm James. My pronouns are they and them.
And I'm Jamie and my pronouns are he and him.
But fortunately, to replace David, much better actually, we have a very special guest. We have Dr. Eleanor Janega on. Eleanor, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks so much for having me, and I am a she/her.
And today we are going to be, doing our usual stuff, and then we are going to be talking about whether or not the end of the world is nigh, and whether or not we should feel positive about that, basically. But first, can't start this episode without what will probably be a fond farewell to the best people in Britain, the Gestalt consciousness of Britain, so far as I'm concerned. It's finally that time. The Captain Tom Foundation is likely to close down in the coming months. R.I.P. again to a real one.
I'm mashing my F key in solidarity with his family.
I wish David was on so he could play taps.
I'm doing some elder abuse in their honor. Yeah, everyone, please throw a pound coin at your eldest relative.
Yeah, but only after they've completed that lap in the garden. You got to make them work for that shit.
Something of a disincentive, though, Rob, to throw a pound coin after they've done the lap.
Did you see that they've turned him into a chair? They've got like a Captain Tom uniform chair.
Is it going to be like? Is it like one of those fucking like household pets that's been like embalmed?
I mean, if they had, they've just embalmed his uniform. But no, they've got like a settee.
Embalmed his
like
uniform. What? Got it dry cleaned.
Yeah, sure.
No, it looked like this horrible little uncomfortable chair that you can only have if you have like too much money and no sense. And it's like his full dress uniform with like all his ribbons and pins on it, and like you can sit with your back against them, which must be like incredibly unpleasant as well. And
sit with your back against the medals and feel the war crimes.
But yeah, basically the closure of the Captain Tom Foundation was admitted by the
Captain Tom Foundation and Spa.
Well, I really wanted to get to that, yes. Because basically this was admitted during proceedings because the family is still trying to stop Central Bedfordshire Council from destroying the Captain Tom Memorial Spa and Pool, and also charity headquarters.
Prisons get a library, other war criminals get a spa.
I'm taking all of my meetings in the Onsen as God intended. Yeah. Thank you. It's the only way to make sure no one's wearing a wire, all right?
Well, I mean, Eleanor, you're saying it's an onsen. It's not quite that. Actually, during proceedings, they said because it was going to be torn down because they made it like far too big without asking for like council permission. But now they said it's not an onsen for the family. Actually, it's a revalidation pool for elderly people in the area. But they would only do one-on-one sessions and only once or twice a week. So I assume that the rest of the week, the Captain Tom family is just chilling out.
Just chilling in the pool.
Do you know, if I was an enterprising council officer, I'd check if they've got insurance for offering that service, because that's the real tell. They almost certainly don't.
I mean, I don't think you really need to get that far because, they also said, this was the same lawyer, according to Sky, that the Captain Tom Onsen would also offer the opportunity for people to meet on a coffee morning basis. That's probably going to be not more than once a month, like a church opening for coffee morning for Macmillan. I love these people so much.
Rich people, man. Like, it's just everything is wasted on them. It's like those rich people who have like really valuable paintings, and you have to like phone them up and ask if you can go and have a look at it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and then they take the tax write-off of providing a public service by allowing you to come and see their Picasso. So sure.
Well, I mean, that used to be like the normal thing. If you wanted to like go see somebody's art collection, like you used to be able to like rock up to the manor house and just like wander in. Like you asked for permission, but when it got too popular, they had to like start. You had to like ask permission first. It wasn't as good anymore.
We need to like introduce a law that says that if you are really rich, you are allowed to own like these extremely like culturally significant paintings and artifacts. However, your house is never allowed to be locked again, and anyone can come in at any time with no notice to try and have a look at it.
Okay, how about this? They can keep the pool, but I'm allowed to go there, look them dead in the eyes, and spit in it once a week. How about that?
I think that that's no more than fair. I think that
You can keep the spa so long as I'm allowed to sit in the big Captain Tom chair.
Yeah.
I mean, that is technically not the only thing they kept. Apparently, they also kept £800,000 in book royalties from the books ghostwritten by some other guy, but in Captain Tom's name. Because they did it.
What books? It makes me feel like I'm going crazy. Do you know how much money 800K's in royalties off of book sales is? What the fuck do you mean? What books? Who is buying
Eleanor.
these?
Eleanor, it was written by a ghost.
Did they not do? Did they not do one of those fucking Little People Big Dreams kids books?
Oh God!
You know, the Prince Charles one.
Oh my God!
I saw one of them in the shops. There was his memoir, which I assume glossed over the many war crimes he committed in Burma.
There were 3 of them. There's Tomorrow.
Yeah, there was
Will Be a
Captain
Good Day.
Tom's. Yeah, there was Captain Tom's life lessons and catchy
that was the most
slogans.
recent one.
Oh
Yeah.
Yeah, and there was also 100 Steps, which I think was the the story of Captain Tom. So there's Tomorrow Will Be a Good Day. Hey, everyone have hope. There's here's his memoirs, excluding the war crimes, and then there's Captain Tom's life lessons because we want to keep the brand going.
Such memorable quotes as, "Can I come in now, love? I'm quite cold."
Oh, my bones hurt, the ones that I have left.
I sure would like to beep, 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 beep the Burmese.
But yeah, I wanted to ask Eleanor, because you're, so far as I know, the only published author in this distinguished group. When can we expect 100 life lessons from Eleanor with the small royalties of, I assume, £5 million?
The world isn't ready. Okay, they hate to see a girl boss winning, and by girl boss winning, I think that I mean a working class woman moderately succeed in the world of public medieval history. Everyone's
vying for the title.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I actually did a little research into how they sold all the copies they sold, because you're right, there wasn't there was a few paperbacks kicked around, but it didn't seem to sell that amazingly. Apparently most of it was digital sales, so people buying shit on their Kindle essentially to have a read about Captain Tom. Also, there was a deal with Audible audiobooks that meant that it was free if you owned Audible for a limited period. So yeah. I'm not saying they got subsidized for their role in manufacturing consent during the pandemic, but I'm not saying it either.
I mean, Audible really with their finger on the pulse of what the people want there. Well, Okay, fine.
I mean, we should all be writing into Audible saying that, we want more books about the medieval period and, the role of women.
I want more free garbage.
That's right. That's right.
It may be hot dog shit, but it's free.
I will leave the last word to this glorious saga, and what I am concerned of is the best family in Britain, to his lovely daughter Hannah.
They're emblematic, aren't they?
Yeah, it's powerfully emblematic of Britain. This is from a quote this is a bit from The Guardian. In March 2022, Hannah Ingram Moore defended her family's stewardship of the foundation to Philip Schofield on Good Morning. I think we've been incredibly naive, but I don't think that means we're bad. I think that we are wholesome, good people, and we run businesses we understand. We stepped into this for love, for humanity, for allowing as many people as we can to have access to his legacy. And quite frankly, truer words have never
Stepped
been
into this
spoken.
for love. Fuck off.
She's a PR.
That's what you say. That's what you say when you come downstairs in the night and find out the hard way that your dog shit on the carpet.
After I step in the dog shit, we stepped into this for love.
Just hearing a cash register ka-ching in the background as she's talking there. Sure, okay, whatever.
Well, I mean, she's a fucking PR person, so one rung above estate agents and bailiffs.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty much of a muchness. But I mean, it's like, clearly, ma'am, you didn't step into it, quote unquote, for love. In theory, the entire scam was predicated that you stepped into it for charity. Right?
Yeah.
And like, I mean, that was the only reason that like his legacy, other than the war crimes, was just like walked up a garden, raised some cash in it, right? And then like, if you then don't give, anyway, I'm tired. I can't with rich people.
Sit in the big Captain Tom chair, Eleanor. Take a load off.
Yeah, take a load off. Just put the
free acupuncture from the medals.
Yeah, I was going to say, just put the cushion over the medals, because otherwise it's going to get real uncomfortable in about 5 minutes.
Sitting in the Captain Tom chair to like get new slurs for the good people of Myanmar through osmosis.
Just to feel something.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I have other news, Eleanor, that might cheer you up, but maybe not as much as you might think. Is apparently you are. Well, I think that you are probably on a Department for Education watch list.
Yeah. So
congratulations to you.
I have to say that you were generally the ones to break this to me, and I was like, yeah, I guess I probably am. Damn. Like, I was just like, oh Lord, yeah.
For like a little bit of context, this is a thing that was released, I think, this week or last week in The Guardian, that apparently like a whole bunch of people involved in professional education, so like teachers, but also education, specialists, etc., found out that like the Department for Education held files up to like 60 pages long, including all their like tweets and negative comments regarding government policy or Ofsted in general. Like they would have like these big files on you, which is like, it's really comforting that the Department for Education is doing that.
Yeah, they're going to have all my best guillotine memes in there. Like, my Brendan collection is going to be on record. And let me tell you what.
Eleanor, your Brendan's go on your permanent record, young lady. You really need to think about your future.
And that's where, really what I want to be remembered for. Because, I've got that one of the ambassadors, but it's Brendan's head instead of a skull. So, yeah, that's the good stuff.
I do like the idea of you like appearing before the education tribunal and just saying, "Your Honours, I would like to first have entered into the records," and then just like these printed pages that they like have to do in the U.S. Congress that they like, just these big printouts of Brendan memes and other garbage that like.
No, it's just page after page of one huge Brendan.
Forehead, yeah.
Yeah, if they've got that old like dot matrix paper, that like just came out in an accordion style
down the hallway.
One on there.
You just have it running in the background throughout the trial the entire time.
They say that online harassment and bullying is bad, but we did make Brendan put a hat on one time, so who's to say?
One time? Yeah. Forevermore, I think.
But yeah, like I should stress, like, by the way, this like goes a little bit further than just like monitoring and like collecting your base tweets. Basically, if you tweet too much negativity about the UK education system, you get disinvited from like speaking slots either run or sponsored by the Department for Education.
Didn't this happen to Mick Wright's wife?
Yes, it did, but that was for an AI thing. I don't think that was a schools thing, but I might be wrong on that one. Sorry, Mick, if this is the same thing. They did include like the specific example of like one children's book author and some kind of educational consultant, Dr. Mina Konkbaye, I hope I pronounced that correctly, who like had to submit her entire opening speech to the organization that like she was giving a talk to, and then that had to give it to the Department for Education for like review and checking before she could give the speech, and also after they cut her time, like her speaking time, in half anyway, which is just like, do you people not have something better to do? I seem to recall from like a week or two ago that like the schools were, in a non-ironic sense, but quite literally collapsing.
Yeah, well, the last thing you want in your collapsed school is wokeness. So
yeah. And it's the fact that they've got time to do this is what really bothers me. Everyone else is just kind of like completely under the gun, running from one thing to the next, trying not to get beamed by like the meringue that we made schools out of in the head. And here they are like, oh, I didn't like what you said on the on September the 27th, 2021. You said, "Lol, look at Boris's hair." It just come on. Come on.
Yeah, McCarthyism really took a step down after the 70s, didn't it?
Ugh.
Now, I mean, this one apparently is in specific context. This is from the article in the Guardian. Kong Baye believes that the department attempted to silence her because she challenged its COVID recovery strategy for young children. Like other early years experts, she disagreed with
They
the
had a
strategy.
COVID recovery strategy?
Apparently so.
Yeah, it was let it rip.
I would simply recover. What?
I would simply eat out to help out. That is what I would do, but in school or something. She disagreed with this strategy because initially it recommended putting very small children who misbehaved into timeout or taking away their toys as punishment. Strategies that she believed to be psychologically harmful as well as unlikely to work. So, not only are you being monitored and punished, you are monitored and punished because you say that 3-year-old, you should probably not take their toys away. Like that seems like
Wait, sorry, they were taking the kids' toys away as part of the COVID recovery strategy?
Yes.
Or did I miss something? What?
The toys were full of COVID, JB, I think.
You can have the toys back once you're able to fight this disease off.
Yeah.
I mean, this is just the most British thing possible, where it's like, what does this have to do with COVID? I don't know, I just thought I'd make lives worse for small children. But,
Yeah, I mean,
Britain is just rapidly becoming wet Florida.
And Florida's already pretty fucking wet. It's just...
Florida's sunk, and we're more like, it's not.
Yeah,
like
but
rising up from
Florida's
below.
that horrible foreign wet. We're good old British wet.
But while we're on the topic of young people, we've mainly skipped, and I think we'll continue to skip Labour Conference Week because it was everything you expected from the last whatever years.
Oh boy, Keir Starmer saying they're not going to do anything, or saying they're going to do something, and
No. This is Yvette Cooper announcing that Labour will do something, and actually they've pried some money loose.
If you are ever detected
Is it demand that the Welsh release hostages? Is that what Labour will do?
If one of the government-issued precogs ever detects you thinking about committing a crime, you will just be murdered on the spot.
Good.
No, this is from the press release by Labour themselves. This is me not. This I don't think this is edited. I think I just copy pasted this. In a speech lamenting the growth in knife crime and promising even more anti-gang laws, she promised that young people would be pulled out of lives of crime and violence. So, how do you think that Labour, this particular version of the Labour Party, will be doing that? Such a thing
with one of those crane machines you get at the fun fair. Herd all the criminals into a glass cabinet and then just grab at them with a.
It only works on very round young children. Is that what you're trying to say?
They're going to put a Roblox in one of them, and then the kids will go mad for it.
I was told Christmas only comes once a year, but this very much feels like Labour Crime Week 2. Is it ASBO's 3, Rob?
No, those are respect orders. That's a separate thing, but that's also going to be brought in.
Oh, good. Just putting those mosquitoes everywhere. Literally, we're just going to drive all the young people into a field somewhere by playing high-pitched noises at them.
Very, very close. But instead of a field, the program will be centered, of course, on Sure Start. But this time they will be. But this time there will be quote-unquote tough love youth centers, which will be called.
What does that mean?
God. Okay, so wait, no, just. All right, let me borrow my boyfriend's rant about this. But one of the things that happened under austerity and indeed in the labor years was the shuttering of youth services and youth centers more generally, right? And they were doing great work with the community. They were doing all sorts of some things with young people. Justin was constantly having billiard balls thrown at his head and would still go back to work and make sure that children didn't live a life of crime. They all got fucking shut down, and now you're you can have them back, but only if you scream at them. What the fuck, man?
You lost youth centers.
It's meant to appeal to the British psyche. We'll take your kids out. We'll get your kids out of your way for a couple of hours a week, and we'll also beat them with hoses.
Yeah, what kids love is voluntary school.
Yeah. I mean, Eleanor, like, I agree. Like, you know, there were like youth centers where kids could do positive things. But what if instead I offered you the following? Ensure existing enforcement measures are effectively utilized, including family interventions, the use of curfews, enforcement of penalties, drug and alcohol interventions, community work, and stronger action against criminal gangs.
Read the first sentence of that again.
How? How?
Ensuring existing enforcement measures are effectively utilized.
So nothing. So that's just copy.
That's something you'd say in a job interview. You know what I mean? It's just word salad that's designed to appeal to management.
I think we've lost youth centres, but we're now getting youth gulags, and I'm, for one, am proud of this. It's a good British tradition.
What I love about this youth gulag, too, though, is they're like, oh, we're going to send you to the gulag, and then, therefore, there will be stronger action against the criminal gang. So it's like, after we made you go to the punishment center, told you that we hate you and that you suck, then, like, surely you won't go back to your friends.
No.
Afterward. Like, okay, whatever.
Actually, what will happen, Eleanor, in phase 2, because phase 1 is about reducing knife crime, but in phase 2, again from the Labour website, they were these young future hubs. That's what they're called. Will be expanded.
Sake, Rob.
Will be expanded beyond youth violence and into other mission objectives such as educational attainment. So you know, they'll just be sent to you.
It's voluntary school.
Well,
It's like the worst fucking teacher you've ever met.
This is like, what they're going to do is, if you're at school and you get a detention, you have to do it in Broadmoor. That's where we're headed.
Well, like, and also this is just like bringing back one of the really bad New Labour youth centre policies, which is, you know, there used to be youth clubs and youth centers where you could just go be a youth and, I don't know, go get some condoms or something like that. And then New Labour brought in this thing, the name of which I can't remember because I love my boyfriend very much, but he'd just be talking and I can't remember things. Okay, but they brought in some...
It do be like that.
I mean, men be talking, am I right? But they brought in this policy, the name of which escapes me, which was essentially like, oh, and also we'll help them get jobs. And
it was like a fusion of Sure Start and the Job Centre.
Yeah, exactly. And so instead of it just being like, you know, all you have to do, this is communal good, this is somewhere where, you know, young people can go and be and do things. It was like, it has to be vocational. You have to be driving them towards something. And that was essentially the beginning of the end. Because if you couldn't
neoliberalism really is just a mind disease, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's like, because if you can't show that you've got so many kids a job or whatever, they'll cut your funding and blah, blah, blah. And it's like,
Tony Blair's New Deal for 9-year-olds.
Exactly. It's just, it's really depressing.
I mean, it's no surprise that this bears some striking resemblances to previous policy. This is the last bit I want to talk about, but this is from The Guardian about the same plan. The plan also bears similarities to the last Labour government's Youth Crime Action Plan, which was announced by the then Home Secretary Jackie Smith and the then Children's Secretary Ed Balls, who is Yvette Cooper's husband, and, you know, a cunt and a podcaster in his own right. Though those two things often do, you know, that's a Venn diagram with a lot of overlap.
Whatever the opposite of a power couple is, Ed Balls and Yvette Cooper are that.
It's like a draining couple.
The opposite of Laszlo and Nadja from What We Do in the
Exactly. They're a siphoning couple, you know, like just
a discharge couple.
Oh, I don't like that.
Come on. Also, Ed Balls was children's secretary? Jesus, that's creepy and weird. But anyway.
I know. It's yeah. Until, of course, he went on Strictly Dancing and all that other stuff, and now, you know, as a morning TV host, a normal thing that you get to be after you've been in power.
Ed Balls has the kind of energy where I believe you told me he was a child secretary, you know, like work for the boss baby or something.
So yeah, with all that good news out of the way, I wanted to talk basically. Because I've been reading some stuff lately, including Eleanor's blog, and like I wanted to see. You should never
read things.
Well, apart from Eleanor's blog, which you should read.
That's right.
Yeah, reading things burdens you with the curse of knowledge, and like it's just wise to avoid it.
Yeah, read the blog so Eleanor can get you. Got it. Carry on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. So apart from reading, I've also been watching. So I watched the latest Folding Designs, the Dan Olsen video about like GameStop Apes.
Folding ideas.
Falling Ideas, yeah, that's the one. Whatever. And I read the book, a very good book about QAnon called Trust the Plan by Will Sommer. So, if you can pause the recording and watch that very long video and also read the book and then read Eleanor's book and then come back, we'll just hang out here and
What, you want me to do that now?
Yeah, go on.
No.
Either that or you go to the voluntary school, Jamie. Sorry.
But yeah, basically what I want to talk about is how a bunch of the more recent, last 5 years sort of conspiracy theories and sort of group beliefs sort of seem to have become very sort of millenarian and sort of end of the world, almost delightfully doomsday cultish in nature and lookout. And that's not anything really new, because I know that that was also the subject of your PhD dissertation, Eleanor. So
Yeah. So, because I'm all about weird little guys writing about how the end of the world is coming. And the thing is, there's rather a lot of that, especially within the medieval context, because you got to understand medieval Europe is largely Christian, right? And the thing that people tend to forget about is that Christianity is a linear religion, right? There's a beginning, middle, and an end. And so it starts with God making the world and everything, and then your boy JC came back from the dead, got us all out of trouble, and now we're sitting around waiting for him to come back, and it could happen at any moment, right?
It has been a while. I am sitting here, looking at my watch and tutting.
Yeah, exactly. And, he said he was going to be back again any second, and medieval people were like, well, it's getting pretty fucking any second up in here, So when
Winds of winter-ass religion.
Yeah, no doubt. And when you have the apocalypse or the book of Revelation, whichever you want to call it, I like to call it the apocalypse because I think it's more metal. That's giving you all these beasts to look forward to and all these signs. One of the things that medieval people start to do is they look around and they say, okay, here's the things that are going wrong. I think.
Are they basically look around and going, I found one of the signs. It was there in the hedge.
Yeah, I mean, basically. So it's
it's the monster logo.
Yeah, okay, the year 1000, they were Jesus is absolutely going to come back at the year 1000, right? Because, that makes sense, right? Because it's 1,000 years.
Yeah.
So, that...
He loves a round number.
Yeah,
Famously loved a round number.
There's a preacher, Wolfstan, who did a real, the proof of the world ending is the Vikings. And they're like, oh, well, if God is letting, pagans triumph over Christianity, then that must be the world is ending. If you got a famine, world is ending. If you've got, whatever... And then, so you get to the 14th century when you've got, a famine and the Black Death and many wars, everyone is okay, yeah, come on. Come on, bro.
I think today we're a little bit short on, not everywhere on the famine, but, the several wars and the other stuff,
Yeah.
and the global plague. Let's not forget one of them,
Yeah, exactly. And so you have guys like my good friend, Jan Milíč of Kromerzije, who his whole deal is fucking look at this shit. You've seen it. Everything seems to be really quite bad. And I think that probably what is happening is that the world's about to end, but we could get together to divert that from happening, right? So
interesting pickup line.
Yeah, I know, right? So it's and my man is living with a bunch of ex-sex workers in a house. So don't look into it too deeply. All right. Just go with it. It was I want you to brackets, not sexual, according to him. But
end of the world, brackets, not sexual, brackets, normal.
Yeah. Normal. It's just a normal house in what used to be a brothel full of a bunch of women who used to work in the brothel and also some preachers. It's normal. It's a normal community.
Just like the decor,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's a good vibe.
And so, basically, his thing is, it's a lot like Grandpa Simpson in Death. He's Antichrist. It's not Antichrist. Antichrist. But in his signs of Antichrist are all of the war, all the famine. People aren't being nice enough to Emperor Charles IV. People aren't being nice enough to me. things like this. But, all of this can be got at if we reorder society, if we, like he did some nice things, like some of the sex workers that he lived with, like he'd pay their way out of debt so they didn't have to do the job anymore. And like, that's cool.
Oh, that's cool.
Right?
Yeah, that's,
so, like,
that's a good thing.
Like, I always say that he does like a way better job than anyone in like the fucking rescue industry now does. Cause they're just all like, well, put sex workers in jail and that'll solve it. Like at least Milíč was out here being like, well, if you want him to like get a new job, you're probably going to have to give him some money. Right, and a place to stay. He did that. So, but he does these things because he's like, we need to stop the end of the world. We need to stop Antichrist from coming. We need to like reorder society in such a way that all of this can be postponed. Because whilst we certainly know that it's going to happen, it doesn't necessarily have to be right now. Like if we could put a stop to it. And so, yeah, and this is kind of like one of the big ways that like apocalyptic thought is disseminated in the medieval period, because you got to understand that preachers are like the form of mass communication at the time, right? Like in a world where there's incredibly limited literacy and the people who are literate are usually in cities, what happens then is you're not going to like get anywhere by like writing something down. But you might get somewhere if you write something down, like a model sermon, and one priest goes and he will give a sermon, and then someone else goes, that's a really good sermon, can I give it? And he goes, yeah. So you've just preached that sermon to, 100 people, and then that priest goes and does it to 100 more, and 100 more, and 100 more. And so it's a real form of mass communication and mass media. And preaching is like, also for them, like a hot night out. They're like, oh yeah, I can't wait to like go down the square and hear about who's Antichrist. Like that would be fun for me.
Do you know what? How much this lines up with one I've just got in my head? Alex Jones and InfoWars.
Yes,
yeah.
This is lining up pretty well.
Exactly, and like, so you just like say these things, and then people are like, oh yeah, well, I've heard these, I can line them up. And now let me tell you what, who does not like all this shit is the church, right? Because the church, their thing is they're like, you cannot go around predicting the end of the world, because then when the end of the world does not happen, we all look pretty fucking stupid, don't we? Right? And they're like very pragmatic about it. They're like, you can't do this, right? And so like there's a lot of kind of like trying to skirt a fine line with Antichrist or apocalyptic preaching, where like you can't say a day that it's going to happen.
You can't tip our hand like this.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And like, so it's kind of like, they're watching what you're doing and making sure like you can't call a person Antichrist. You can say that like whatever is a sign of Antichrist, but you can't call a person Antichrist, right? There's a difference between like Antichrist accusations and Antichrist language is what we call it. So it's like, there's all these rules that you got to stay on the right side of. But by the time that gets to people, like that might be out the window, because you could say anything you want to a priest for like the literate people, but like when it's like out in the community, whatever, right?
Yeah, it turns out you can just say anything with words.
Yeah, exactly. And this is really popular because like stuff fucking sucks, right? Like it's funny that like I devoted a bunch of time to Milíč, right? Because actually things are pretty nice in Prague at the time comparatively. Like Black Death doesn't hit there quite as hard. They're not really involved in that many wars. Charles IV is putting a bunch of money into the city. But like, hot damn, you go down to Siena or something and it's like half the population just died. There's an army outside the gates. There's no fucking food. And it's like, you could be forgiven for being like, yeah, I guess it is the end of the world. Like half of everyone I know is dead, right?
Yeah. That's a reasonable sort of being like, okay, it's time to bring in the many-headed beasts and the rains of frogs and all this stuff, because clearly,
Monster logo, yeah,
the monster logo. Especially the monster logo. It's like cat boys are outside the gates, etc. So it's understandable. And actually, I have to say that, like, when I look at conspiracy theories now, or like the varying like doomsday cults or QAnon, I'm like, I can see where you're coming from,
Yeah, yeah, because that's like the other thing, because we recently chatted very briefly on Twitter about this, which was your one of your latest blogs about the 5G zombies, about the
Yes,
about the people who are like who. I don't know how that ball got rolling. I have like various ideas that it's like a synthesis of like post-COVID paranoia and like existing 5G paranoia and all that other jazz. But like that, they did like commit like the cardinal sin of like putting a date on it.
People have always been terrified of like antennas, though. It's something that goes back. It's one of those things that it's like embedded in English law now because of like a bunch of people thought that a radio mast that was being built nearby was like fucking up their brains, but obviously it hadn't been switched on yet. So
you know, do you know where the whole radio wave thing comes from? Because it's actually like with
Radios.
all of these. Well, yes, very good. But it's
a
like
song by
there's
Queen.
yeah, there's like a grain of truth at the heart of all of these conspiracy theories that then gets wildly distorted over time, because the old AM radio transmission towers, you could pick them up in your early dental fillings. Like, you know, if you were close to them and you... Yeah,
Yeah.
if you had the right kind of metal dental fillings back in the day, and you were near an AM tower, then you would start to hear voices coming from your teeth, which went through the bones into your ears, and that was an actual thing. And that is the germ of they're transmitting thoughts into our head, right? Like that's where that whole thing has its origin.
I really like the idea of
crazy.
like a very old ad campaign with like people saying like you would steal an AM radio signal, but it's just like aimed at people with false teeth only. I think that's really great.
Well, it was like, here's the thing, we joke about it, but this was a real problem for quite a few people, because like trying to get to sleep and you've got like fucking talk radio in your head. Can you imagine? You know, imagine you had Ed Ball's podcast
thank God we've got
broadcast
Facebook now.
into you. Yeah. So it's like this was an actual issue, and of course you then combine that with mental illness and paranoid schizophrenia in particular, and someone's going to go, well, some people are noticing, but I'm hearing voices. It must be coming from those broadcast towers the same way. No, I don't have fillings, but that just means that it's more sophisticated. Maybe those people are collateral damage because I must be the real target because I'm important. And that's where it comes from. That's the origin of it. And all the 5G shit, all of the, you know, fear about radio waves, all the, you know, electricity lines might give you cancer. And there's like some stuff in there that suggests that maybe there's something that might be at the root of that, but we'll never know because it's one of these things that's too fundamental to our modern society for anyone to really want to fuck with it. Like, these are the origins, all of these conspiracies, and then they start to percolate and they combine over time. And you take like the COVID stuff where they're like, oh, you know, they can't really be giving us these vaccines for like good reasons. I don't trust the government, so it's got to be a bad reason. And then, you know, you end up with COVID 4G zombies. And it all comes from like little bits of like intersection with reality that then get taken in paranoia, fear, and distrust, and they become this life of its own. So
yeah. Well, what I find really interesting about like sort of this moment in time,
the zombie thing's just wishful thinking, because every right-wing person just wants an excuse to be able to go out and shoot undesirables.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, all zombie movies are just straight up power fantasies about being the cool survivor with, you know, the shotgun. So yeah, that 100% makes sense. But like, what I find really
more down the other.
Also that. But what I find really interesting, like about this particular moment, like I said, because like we've just had a pandemic and life is, you know, categorically getting worse for most people everywhere, you know, including in the Imperial Core. And there are several wars ongoing, including, you know, end time wars in the Holy Land, which is a kettle of fish all of its own. But like,
oh Jesus,
what I find interesting is that like, you do have a sort of, I want to talk about some specific ones in a moment. So like you do have this sort of, you know, it seems like the end times, like the apocalyptic cults or the apocalyptic thinking is like spreading a little bit, but it mainly seems to be on like the right of the spectrum. And it just seems to be like a product of late capitalism rather than, you know, us over-interpreting the Bible in a moment of severe crisis, basically.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that you're right. And what I would say is you see it on the right because you kind of have a heady mixture of the fact that these are people who really believe in capitalism, right? So these are people who are like completely lost in the sauce. And of course, libs have this too. I'm not saying that they don't. But they are led to understand that especially Americans, right? And certainly it's true here in Britain as well. But that they are in the greatest country on God's earth, that capitalism is the only system that works, that what they were supposed to do was cede all control over capitalism, get rid of government regulations, get rid of like any kind of unions, get rid of anything like this, and that they would then prosper, right? And also in America, on the right, this is very much linked to the prosperity gospel as well. This is a very specific idea that people with money are also moral, which is certainly preached, like quite literally, in churches in America. Yeah. So if you are not prospering, then how the fuck do you explain this, right? It has to be a falling apart of the social order. There needs to be a conspiracy. We need to be getting down towards the end days because capitalism does work. And if capitalism isn't working, well, then there needs to be some nefarious power behind that, right? And if capitalism alone couldn't stave off COVID from happening, then COVID's a conspiracy. Right, and
a grasping agency, isn't it?
Yeah,
exactly.
And the flip side of that same thing, Eleanor, is like I'm a good subject of capitalism. I go to my job and buy jet ski or whatever the fuck, because it is, it is not just a belief for poor people, and therefore I am good. So it cannot be I individually am failing capitalism. It's not like there's no moral failure of not doing it. Of seeing yourself as having failed capitalism. You can only be failed by capitalism through the agency of communists or Hamas or whoever's under the bed.
I think there's a very simple narrative that kind of explains this, which is, and it's the difference between liberals and like Republicans in the States, is like to the liberal, capitalism's excesses sucks and government regulation can fix it. That's like part of their credo. To the Republican, government regulation is what causes capitalism to suck. And what that means is that anything bad that happens must be coming from the government in some way because it's impeding on this pure, like as Eleanor said, this kind of form of capitalism that can emancipate us all. So the liberals are kind of inoculated a bit against this kind of wild thinking because they're like, oh no, we just need to get Elizabeth Warren in and she'll fix it all. Whereas the conservatives are like, oh no, Elizabeth Warren's and anyone like them, they must be the source of this problem. And if I can't figure out what the problem is directly, then do you have some magical thinking that could fill in my gaps, please?
Ooh, like that to fill my gaps, but things of this nature. But yeah, I think that you are right in that there are, it's basically kind of like the Protestantism and Catholicism of capitalism, right? So let's say that I'm just going to call the libs are Catholics, and they're like, oh yeah, you want to have this, you want to have a force that is kind of regulating this, and that who can tell you what is right and wrong, i.e. the church. Whereas, the Protestants are over here on the side of like unfettered capitalism, where it's like, nah, you'll probably be right, and it'll be okay. Don't worry about it. Like you'll figure it out. You'll figure it out on your own. You can read the book. It's about this like personal, individualized thing, right?
And you can self-study your way into it. You don't need to be told by an authority like the New York Times how to save yourself. You can do your own deep dive research. And
if you're on the far end, you're a Calvinist Protestant, and you're one of the elect and God's own best boys, so you can't fuck up.
Yeah, and those are like, the already rich. And then what you have underneath are kind of like all the people who are sure that they are going to be like raptured into wealth at any moment once they just kind of figure out what the cheat code is. And those that don't, end up being like, I don't know, 5G zombie, etc.
Yeah, I mean, and that's sort of the point that I wanted to talk about, like two sort of specific, like recent forms of this kind of sort of conspiratorial thinking, but also like what we were talking about, like with Jan Milíč, is these people, they do think that if they perform the right actions and have sort of the right moral code, that they will be saved by under the mechanisms of capitalism, basically by forms of extreme wealth. That at the end of the day, if you follow the steps correctly, if you adhere to this sort of level of faith, you don't get like the resurrection and a life of hanging out with the angels, strumming harps, or what it is you do up there. But just it is temporal wealth, and that seems to be the main thing. So like the first thing I wanted to sort of reference was the Folding Ideas, the most recent one that Dan Olsen put out. Like I won't explain the whole thing because it's quite complicated, but basically the
How
mechanism.
long's the fucking video? It's like two and a half
2.5 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like basically, it's something I didn't even know either. That like when you had the whole GameStop short squeeze, and some people made some money, but more people lost a lot of money. That like a bunch of the people who got stuck like holding the shares, holding the bag, basically, instead of just accepting their fate, if you will, sort of went completely down the rabbit hole and now believe that specifically engineered through holding their GameStop shares, or what are the other meme stocks like AMC, what are the others, that like if you hold them long enough and strong enough, that like basically and like you commit sort of a sacred act of registering them directly, that if you do that long enough and like you expose the criminal conceits on a long enough timeline, that like their registered shares of GameStop will eventually be worth infinity money, and that will collapse the global economy as well as the US Federal Reserve, and then that will put them on top of the global capitalist pyramid, basically. That's a very short summary of a sort of quite complicated thing, but yeah.
It's very funny to me that these guys are like, when everyone finds out that the market is not rigged for ordinary people, that's going to bring this whole thing down. It's like, what are you fucking talking about, you morons?
We are going to democratize the entire stock market by funneling money into a dying business.
Brilliant.
I mean,
It's like I was saying this to Rob earlier. It's really sad because for reasons we're not going to go into because we do not have enough time. Like again, with every grievance that drives people to be like fascists or to embrace kind of cult thinking, there is a point at the heart of it that they're unable to accept because it conflicts so entirely with their entire worldview. And like the tragedy is they just can't bring themselves to accept that the market is rigged so the house always wins. Everyone in charge knows it. They will never change it. And, sorry, you're left holding the bag. Like, they can't accept that. And so they have to go into this magical thinking and off the deep end. But there is, like the sad thing is there is, like, real injustice at the heart of it. There is, like, a real problem. There are, like, unfair rules. Some of the things that they've noticed are correct. But they can't contextualize it properly because the implications are so destructive to their perception of themselves as getting out of this rut they're in. Like, the world is terrible. And if they actually look at the real reality, it just says, hey, yeah, it's terrible, live with it. And they just can't do that. And so here we are, going to the moon, baby.
Yeah, it's like very funny to me because with all of these, I mean, well, it's funny, but it's sad. What they all come down to is that to admit that capitalism doesn't work would simply be too much. They're in so much denial about it that to explain why they haven't prospered, and there needs to be conspiracy. There's got to be conspiracy at the heart of Wall Street. It's like, honey, that's what it's set up to do.
Yeah. Like there are conspiracies. They are very real, but it's not the one you're thinking because it's like it's too baroque. But I think that's also like that's the attraction, right? You have to. The more baroque the fantasy, the more elaborate the systems of oppression, and sort of the weirder the ways that you get out of this. Which is like, if I just hold on, my money that I invested, that's now worth nothing, or not nothing yet, but whatever, GameStop. That's worth a lot less, presumably, than what I put in. If I just hold on long enough and then believe hard enough, and in these sort of self-reinforcing cycles as well. Because that's the other thing I wanted to ask you, Eleanor, sort of to draw the parallel back to like, your favorite era is like the level of like sort of self-reinforcing structures that this would build. Like, did Jan Milíč then have guys who would like follow him and say, "Yeah, you're right," and sort of get
oh god, yeah. Like a whole school of them. He had like, like he's hanging out with the ex-sex workers and like an indeterminate number of dudes who would do things like copy out his sermons and like circulate his sermons all around Europe. Yeah, I know, like dudes rock, absolutely. They would get arrested for going too far in their own sermons, and like they weren't able to walk the fine line that Milíč was. And eventually, too, like Milíč himself gets into trouble. Like he gets called over to Avignon, which is where the papacy is at the time. Because basically, like a bunch of haters, like a bunch of Franciscans, took exception to the fact that he was calling them all servants of Antichrist. And they wrote a letter of complaint to the Pope. They were like, I'm gonna like speak to your manager. And Milíč had to go over to Avignon, but by all accounts, they were just like, this is fine. But he died there, so like, you know, who knows? Like one way or another, it doesn't really matter. But you had a bunch of dudes who were just kind of like, yeah, we're going to uphold this. And then the minute that Milíč dies, like they basically, you know, the center could not hold. Like he was the center of this community that they called Jerusalem, with all the sex workers and preachers. And the minute he was out, they couldn't do the thing. Like they didn't have the charismatic force. They didn't have the vision to kind of drive forward these same ideas. So it just kind of scatters. And you have other people who kind of try to pick up his mantle. There's like a guy called Matev Yanov, who is kind of like a very bargain basement Milíč, who doesn't do a very good job. And then eventually gets reinvented as the Hussites, kind of like later down the line. Although the Hussites are like, the church cannot be reformed, burn it all down, right? Whereas Milíč was like, the church can be reformed and must be reformed. So Milíč is a lot like, you know, your GameStop people.
Yeah.
Where he's like, no, this system would be fine, but we need to, but like, or maybe he's a lib, you know, where it's like, we just need to tinker with the system, right? And then it'll be okay. And by the time you get to Jan Hus, he's like, the system is fucking
burn it,
whack, get it.
But the interesting thing is that, and like I think that's sort of I don't know, maybe that's the change, maybe that's not really the change, is that like now, obviously because of like the mass media and the social media we now have, like you don't, I mean, one guy is helpful, but you don't need one. Because, like, so far as I understand it, like, that's the other sort of conspiracy I wanted to talk about. Because, like, that's what the book I was reading, the book Trust the Plan by Will Sommer. Because this is, like, an aspect of, like, QAnon that I didn't know about. But, like, Q himself or herself or themselves haven't posted in a really long time. But it's not necessary. Like, others have taken up the mantle and sort of it mutates and morphs, like, under this big banner. But it doesn't need... Like, once it got going, it didn't need this central, like, this pivotal figure to, like, hold the reins and steer the whole thing. It sort of, it seems to spark, like, it's own thing now.
Yeah. And that's certainly, you know, a feature, I think, of these things, where it's like, it will then mutate, right? So you're not going to have exactly, like, the same stuff that was coming out of Q, but it will be similar and it will build on that, right?
Yeah, so the thing that I wanted to talk about, this is, like I said, the second thing is like, so apparently within sort of QAnon law or understanding, there are these sort of, there's also a promise of debt forgiveness and debt erasure, which is incredibly, I mean, that's, you know, the Roman Republic nearly fell a number of times because people tried to bring in debt erasure. So it's a very powerful, it's a very old thing, of course, for, you know, people in difficult times. But it starts, it's one of these things that's a nested conspiracy. It's like one inside another. So I wanted to like sort of briefly mention like the first like layer, which was what they called Omega, which is like that's a fairly sort of standard-ish conspiracy theory that there is a secret system of prime banknotes that rules the world with like these special prints of $100 bills, and that if you have access to like these prime banknotes and the prime banking system, like that's where the real money is. Like that's where, you know, the mega tycoons and the European aristocracy, they don't make money like you and I make money. They have access to this higher level, sort of Illuminati level of banking, basically.
Yeah, man. If you get like the original $100 bill, you can stick that bad boy in a scanner and just print infinite money.
I love that.
I mean, sort of, yeah. So this is a guy, and all under the sort of the broader umbrella of Q and QAnon. There's a guy called Hood in Indiana, I want to say. This is from the book. Hood promised potential Omega investors, so this is the banknotes thing, 50-to-1 returns in 9 months on each share of $100, which he himself would then reinvest 3 times because he has access to this prime banking system. That meant that each $100 share would, in just a few years, become worth $12.5 million. And actually, he was living in a trailer. I want to say it's this town in Indiana. But like people were mailing him so much money that like the town itself became flooded with like physical currency because he would just give it to people. Like he would just give people stacks of $100 bills. So like this whole town, which was like a depression setting town basically, all of a sudden had like new cars and elegant restaurants because like this one guy was like hoovering up $100 bills from QAnon and like Omega believers.
I mean, this is a certified Dude Rocks moment.
This guy, I mean, he also fleeced like $50 billion from, destitute people and went to prison because,
Yeah, well, look, but some of those people, were QAnon believers, so who's to say?
You can't deny that the guy had vision.
Yeah. But I find this a very particularly cute little conspiracy theory because it hinges on cash, where it's like, yeah, the issue is the cash, not like, none of this is about cash, guys. Like it's such an old-fashioned way of thinking about it. It's like that's literally has nothing to do with it. It's about the fact that rich people don't, like, debt doesn't apply to them. That's what it is. Like
the fucking GameStop thing has the same issue at Quota, where they think it's all about the bonds, the actual stocks that underlie that show we got shares in the company, etc. When no, it's that literally the rules don't apply to like market makers in the way that they apply to you, and they never will. Like they just it really is that they become so focused on an object as the reification of like the disorder in the world and how taking control of this object will fix it. It's it's like, I just need to, if we can get our hands on the magic sword Excalibur, then we can put the true King of England on the throne and all will be right with the world, all will reign, true.
Yeah, it's the old adage of like, if you owe the bank $1,000, that's your problem. But if you owe the bank $1 billion, it's the bank's problem. But like your interpretation of that is because $1 billion requires special $100 bills.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, sort of. The most fantastical thing, just as a brief side note, and then we'll move on from the Omega to what I find the much more interesting one. But like the guy running the con, this Hood guy, at some point started asking people to wrap the $100 bills they were sending him in tinfoil to avoid spies in the postal service.
Yes.
Fuck yeah!
I don't want my dollar bills to become woke.
I mean, but like I said,
I love that tinfoil has this, like, do you know what I mean, secret life. It's like, yeah, you can use it to keep your dinner hot, or you can also use it to thwart the CIA.
Oh God, right. It's wonderful that I mentioned it earlier. Again, the tinfoil thing. So, right, if you've got the fillings which are picking up the signal from the AM radio, right? If you put a medium in the way which can pick up the signal, then what will happen is the power of the signal will be reduced as it starts vibrating the tinfoil instead.
Oh.
And so some people who had that problem found that if they slept with tinfoil on their head, they didn't hear the noise because it was going, like, basically the energy was being dissipated by a very crude, not proper, but attempt at a Faraday cage. That's where it comes from. It's so stupid, but obviously you can imagine like a game of telephone that gets passed along, and all it takes is one schizophrenic person who's hearing voices, and boom, tinfoil hats.
I don't know why, that's reminding me of like the greatest product that you can buy on Amazon, which is a Faraday cage for your wireless internet router.
Oh, yes.
And then all of the comments saying that my internet didn't work after this is like,
yeah, dude,
5 stars.
But yeah, so like this again, the Omega is kind of nothing new. The thing about the special banknotes, that's very standard. Like that's both a con and a conspiracy. That's very long running. But it gets interesting where it warps into a thing called Nesara, Nesara, which is basically the writings of a very eccentric engineer from Louisiana in the 1960s, which are rediscovered by an original follower of the Omega banknotes thing, a woman called Shaini Goodwin. And NESARA, or GSARA, stands for the National Economic Stabilization and Recovery Act, or in the bigger version, even the Global Economic Stabilization and Recovery Act. So this is like this woman, Shiny Goodwin, sends a lot of money to the Omega guy, loses it, still believes in it, but in sort of, whilst being terminally online, discovers this thing that like it was like basically an engineer from Louisiana who wrote this like very long draft law, and then
was it the time cube?
No, he said. I'll from the book. Shiny Goodwin told her followers that the Nasara was a bill for restructuring the entire world. It would eliminate credit card debt, mortgage payments, and the Federal Reserve. The Omega, the special dollar bill thing, was just one of 50 programs within Nasara, each of which would shower fabulous wealth on ordinary people. Notably, considering her own 5-figure tax debts, Goodwin said that Nasara would also abolish income tax and the Internal Revenue Service. So again,
Shiny Goodwin, you would have loved Bitcoin.
But the special $100 bills, which are being made by the government, will be used to get rid of your tax burden from the government. But also, they're not being given to ordinary people. They're only being given to rich people.
Yeah.
So...
Well, I mean, whether or not the federal, like the federal mint actually prints these $100 bills, I'm not entirely sure of. And like for the sake of, my own Google ads, I didn't want to go down that rabbit hole because I think I would find 20 answers, none of which would line up with each other.
This is a reification of the Jubilee horn in the form of like a fucking government bond, but a special government bond that isn't available for purchase. Like that's the intersection here.
Yeah, but but what I find really interesting about it is like much like the Boas, the mother of all short squeezes, the thing we were just talking about with GameStop, and then this sort of folding in of even and Q itself of even more different like layers of conspiracies and different things that at some level they all contradict each other because they have to, but it doesn't seem to matter. Like you can pick, it's sort of a pick and mix basically at this point. Again, there's a great bit from the book. As Goodwin kept up the updates from her trailer home, Nasara started to mutate. Benevolent aliens were added to the mix. Goodwin
Yes!
It's been a while since we've seen them. That's a proper like 1990s thing, like it.
Remember the good old days where a good old fashioned conspiracy theory, like the Twin Towers were deliberately blown up by George Bush. Good times.
Yeah, it's Posadism decided to go take some courses at the Chicago school, and here we are.
She also won fans who had never been involved in the original Omega dollar bill scam, ultimately attracting at least 15,000 people to her messages. Supporters of the mythical law deluged newspapers with letters to the editor demanding that Congress finally unveil Nasara. Believers wrote Nasara now on their utility bills, refusing to pay on the grounds that the bill absolved them of the debt. That's sovereign citizenship, Sid. That's the... A few years ago, you would do the same, but you'd say you can't send me to court.
There really is.
It's the fringe flag.
There really is nothing new under the sun, is there?
No.
But again, I'm just so confused by the idea that Congress has this bill and they're just waiting on it, and they're going to do it at any moment. But also Congress, in the form of like the Internal Revenue Service, are the persecutors.
Yeah,
right.
But it gets even better, Eleanor, because apparently this is in yet another like mutation a little bit further down the line. Nasara, or GSARA, the global version of same, has already been passed by Bill Clinton at gunpoint under force from the military. But the US Supreme Court then put a gag order on everybody, and that's why we're not allowed to know about it.
Okay.
Makes sense.
So it's secret knowledge, and it only absolves you if you know about it.
Yeah, this traces back to like the Lesser Key of Solomon style stuff, which is basically, hey, did you know if you know the secret laws of the world, you can like hack the religion we know and invoke a demon to give you all the things you actually want? Of course, it's very dangerous and difficult, so it's not very well known. And it's like it's the same thing. Sovereign citizenship is that. It's like there are archaic laws of the world, and you, the magician, can invoke them to peer behind like the fake world that we're told that's passed to us in the church, and instead, like, you know, get down to the real root of things, which also doesn't contradict the standing order of the world. It's just a new layer of, like, knowledge to it. It's all very, like, I cannot reject the world as it is, therefore I have to heavily, like, augment it and write additional details in order to fit my emancipation into it. It's like, nothing is new. You're totally right, Alistair.
That's right.
Again, because I was thinking about it sort of in the longer historical context, is like this is like one last quote from the book, but sort of to wrap this sort of thinking about it up, but also to sort of bring it back into to like the today. And then, you know, there's no one factor that makes someone believe in conspiracy theories, but after talking to QAnon believers for years, I've started to notice some commonalities that go beyond the world of politics. They often seem angry about the state of the world and their place in it, and conversely get a special pleasure in the knowledge that they think that Q has shared with them, reveling in the secrets that set them apart from the average person. As one believer put it to me with a smile, they know the news before everyone else does. In a confusing world, a conspiracy theory like QAnon gives people something to put their faith in, and I think that's such an interesting... Because essentially what you're doing, this is just faith. It's, again, you know, in this modern rational world where, you know, we have Dick Dawkins. Once again, we...
Yeah, what if the Bible was actually posted on /B on 4chan?
I mean, in a way, yeah. So, what I find...
That's what fucking Q was before he got shuffled. Whatever the fuck it was. Got banned off of 4chan. And then is it 9chan or some shit?
8 or 9chan,
the one where the one where the
that's too many chans.
Yeah, the one where that mass murderer posted his manifesto, which didn't raise any eyebrows. So yeah, it's a very, very cool place to be drawing an entire like pseudo religion from.
So yeah, like the thing that I wanted to, you know, sort of ask Eleanor, like, you know, again, you know, because we are, you know, little plug up front, we are not so different. Like, are we just simply still medieval peasants trying to make sense of like extremely confusing and frightening times, but we've just like invented our own sort of new and old demons to fit in with our sort of current... It's not even a religion like capitalism, it's this mode of being, like, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that it is a mode of being. We worship the line, you know. If line go up, we're happy. If line go down, we're sad. And we are confused because line go up doesn't actually correspond to what our own lives are. And I would say that, you know, one of the things that makes it slightly different from medieval conspiracy theories is you have, of course, this focused on individualism, right? You'll find out the cheat code. You will get the special $100 bill. You know about Nesra or whatever. And so as a result, they have to give it to you, but you know, not necessarily the group. And, you know, the difference between that often and medieval conspiracy theories is that, like, something has to be done as a group within medieval conspiracy theories, which is, you know, maybe better, like, because at least they're calling for collective action. And, but I mean, this
is what capitalism took from us.
Yeah, but I mean
in a way, yeah.
Yeah.
In a weird way, yes.
We also do, of course, have massive overlaps, and you know, so let's quote my own writing, right? So, the article that I wrote on this, which is called "On Sickness and Conspiracy," I'm talking about you know, the idea
the 5G
that
zombies.
Yeah. When I talk about the 5G zombies as like you know, one of these kind of overlaps, right? This is a lot like the conspiracy that Jewish people were poisoning wells to cause the plague. And what I say about that is it's, of course, absolutely abhorrent and horrifying, and it makes me want to cry. But it also has all of the hallmarks of conspiracy theories now, because there's a shadowy group of elites who are bent on destroying a society. Check. You got word of mouth about nebulous proof that this is happening. Check. You got a weird misunderstanding about how you would even go get a poisonous substance in the first place. And, oh, baby, you know that's a huge check, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, that is true about like the 5G coronavirus zombies thing, right? Where it's like, I don't know, and then the 5G will activate and then bada bing, bada boom, there's your poison. But it's also true about these Nestor things. It's also true about these Omega things, right? There's these
and
elites
definitely about
that...
the GameStop thing. Like, that's like definitely...
Absolutely. Whether we're talking about like a poison that is going to trigger us all into being zombies, and there's this bad understanding of poison, you've also just got like, the bad understanding of, the poison of capitalism, of the poison of the market, of the poison of money being an actual thing that they don't really quite understand.
I too have some of the quotings of your writing, specifically that 5G zombie piece in the show notes, because like, the difference here is that Gina, the 5G zombie woman, and her weirdo friends, unlike medieval Europeans, have been given every possible way to understand what is going on around them and are simply choosing to ignore it. And I find that's like... Because part of the conspiracy theory is like you need to build sort of these psychological walls around you to literally ignore, not always factual reality, like factual reality is incredibly messy and different variation, perceptions of reality and so on and so forth. But like, you could almost say that like at the same time as obviously the internet is incredibly sort of a powerful accelerant for all of this, you could just say, well, you could just go to like nhs.whatever to look up the 5G zombies. I don't know if they wrote a thing, but like, or you could do some of your own homework and just realize, okay, maybe that's not how stock markets work. And what I find so interesting about it is that rather than doing that, it creates these sort of global echo chambers where like people from everywhere find each other and just reinforce each other. And like I wonder whether or not are we actually like choosing to ignore it, or have we really at this point fractured like the social understanding of reality? I mean, that happened a while ago, but still.
Yeah.
If I could put a thought in here, like, yes, like, medieval peasants don't, they are not so much to blame because they didn't have the excuse. But by the same token, what we're not really making account for is social conditioning and how strong it is in our society. Because, like, to use the GameStop guys as an example here briefly, they've been socially conditioned to believe in a narrative about how the markets work, and even to believe in certain mechanisms about how the markets work, which just aren't true. They're propaganda. They're the narrative that's sold to the rubes to allow people who are rich and powerful and institutional market makers to continue a system that is basically wealth extraction, right? And so even the simple explanation of how a short works is actually not correct. When you dig down into it, it doesn't work like that. It's a simplified consumer narrative. It's not how it actually goes. And so you can say stuff like, well, they could go and just look up these facts online about COVID, for example, but we're missing the fact that many of these people, through their politics and through, what is done to them to make them adopt those politics a lot of the time, they're conditioned to exclude context and to, reject certain framings in order to make a particular view of the world make sense. And so even if the information is at their fingertips, many of them have just had a number done to them where they will never trust, they'll never trust anything the government puts out because it's been put out by the government. And growing up, they were taught by their preacher, who's part of the prosperity gospel, that the government is, in line with Satan and the mark of the devil is coming, all of this. Like, you've got people like that, and you've got petit bourgeois who are conditioned. They cannot go beyond the bounds of capitalism. And it's like, no matter how big cognitive dissonance gets, the outlet will not be a reevaluation of their life because they're not willing to feel like they're to blame, like they're a rube, that that they're a sucker for falling for any of it. They just can't do that. And it's tragic and also a lot of the time deeply stupid, but there you go.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you're pretty bang on here because this is about kind of a rupturing in belief. Right? So even and I blame Martin Luther for this, right? This idea that you can figure it out on your own, that you don't need like a structure to tell you how to figure these things out. You can go out there and blaze a trail, and it's just about you and your understanding of the things in front of you. And that motherfucker I have a lot to answer for.
Yeah. Even though, a proto poster still, even though we as posters all have things to answer for, but him probably more than many others. And sort of moving towards the ending, and I don't know, maybe just as a coder or something, but because we are normally mainly about, stuff based in the UK, is like what I find so interesting. I was trying to think of like, because the $100 bill thing, the QAnon, it washes up on UK shores, but not yet. or not really in its pure form because it's too American. But like the thing that seems to sort of have like the hit version of this is like the 50-minute cities. I think that's like the best parallel that I could draw. And what I find so interesting about that is like the 50-minute cities doesn't even have like sort of the divine cuddle or like the financial cuddle of, you know, extreme wealth if you just send the dollars off or whatever. It's just there's nothing at the end of it. The only freedom that you would get to keep is to drive to the big Tesco, which is just that's such a Brit thing.
Yeah, I mean, we love to drive to Big Tesco, but I think also part of this is that your nephew who laughed at you at Christmas when you talked about politics won't get to do that anymore. I think that's also part of it. Like, that's basically all they're hoping for is that, like, you know, the beleaguered youth will no longer sneer at them as you explain that the real problem is that your car isn't large enough or whatever, you know?
Yeah, you had that like Sadiq Khan is making you get a diesel car from past 2006, I think, is the thing at the moment.
My God.
I know, a fate worse than death. But yeah, I mean, I just wanted to sort of wrap it up there, except with the thought, which I always find an interesting one when you sort of think about these conspiracy theories, and the book about QAnon has. We didn't have time anymore to go into it, but has like some interesting chapters about like where he talks to like the family members of people who've really sort of lost themselves in the world of QAnon. And there's similar stories certainly in the GameStop video by Folding Ideas. But like, you know, I think it's always so interesting that like liberals will just, and like quote unquote smart people will just sort of desperately want to conjure these people out of their constructed realities with like facts and logic. But like the question of how whether or not like these people are retrievable in any way, and whether or not they exist in such numbers that it's important to retrieve them, and like, you know, that's also something I wanted to ask you, Eleanor. Is like after Jan Milíč, you know, dies or gets killed. I can't remember what happens to him.
Just dies.
He just dies. Like, did sort of everybody, not everybody, but did like sort of a bigger majority sort of pack up their shit and go home? Or did they sort of, you know, move off into a different world again? Like a more extreme world?
It kind of gets worse, yeah. And, you know, part of the reason that it gets worse is that material circumstances get crazy in terms of religion. You know, you suddenly have like up to 3 popes at any given time, and that doesn't help the situation, you know. You
would think more popes, more better. But
just
exactly.
Add more popes until it's all good.
Paul Mason would be raging at hearing this.
And like, you know, things that like Milíč was also like pushing for were stuff like debt forgiveness, and, you know, basically saying that like nobles don't do the right thing, the church isn't doing the right thing, you should, you know, be nicer to regular people, and like administer them religiously, don't extract so much money from them, you know, things of this nature. And, you know, it basically gets to the point, you know, in Bohemia at the very least, where there is like outward revolution, which actually slaps.
Yes.
And that's good. And I want to make it clear that when Czech people break from the church, that slaps and is good. But when German people do it, it's bad and it leads to QAnon, you see.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Well,
exactly.
I think that is for certain the last word on this particular issue. I don't know, Jamie, did you have time to look at some comment or commentary, or are we closing the episode here?
I didn't know, mate.
That's all right.
I thought David was doing it.
That's fine. That's fine. I mean, most things are David's fault anyway. That's not a conspiracy. That's just true. Anyway, so I think...
Yeah, I saw it on 4chan.
Yeah, when Jamie breaks from the pod, it's cool and good, but when David does, just
that's right. That's right.
That is right. Anyway, before we go on,
I am forever a blameless angel.
The only path of true salvation lies through Jamie. Anyway, so before we go, Eleanor, of course, I want to give you, like, you know, I have stopped trying to keep up with all your various things. All I know is that I listen to We Are Not So Different, and I'm really enjoying the Arthuriana sequence on what it's like to be a good cuck.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm really enjoying that one. So yeah, you can check out my podcast, We're Not So Different, where, we talk about stuff like this, basically. You can also check out my blog, which we talked about here, which is going-medieval.com, where I write things. You can check out my book, The Once and Future Sex, which is about gender roles for women in the medieval period and now. And then there's like my professional ass podcast, which is called Gone Medieval, where I'm a very good girl indeed and don't say fuck. So those are the main ones.
Yeah, so go check that out if you're some kind of professional for some reason. Anyway, and you can find us, of course, at patreon.com/praxiscast. We will be, right after we say goodbye to Eleanor, we're going to record what I'm quite certain is going to be an incredible episode for the next Patreon. So do get us on that. And otherwise, you can get us, I don't know, are we doing Twitch things, Jamie?
Not at the moment. We're not, because I've only got one arm.
Jamie's in recovery.
I can't game. And also Lila's got no internet, so
I'll fill the gap then. I'll jump on this Thursday and I'll do more.
I don't know what Alistair's excuse is. As far as I'm aware, Alistair has internet in both arms, so he's just slacking.
Does he need to point to the shirt, mate? Stop asking him to work.
Well, I am actually on playing D&D with Sinan and a bunch of other people.
Yay!
But that's on Sinan's Twitch channel.
Splitter.
We're a bunch of internecine fuckers on this podcast. Like,
Does that D&D stream have music by Jordan?
no, it does not.
You can also get Eleanor in old episodes of Sidad's stream where they do Thick Bohemia, if memory serves.
Oh yeah, that Bohemia got so big though.
Yeah. So, on that very, very tempting note, Eleanor, thank you again so much for stopping by. And we will check everybody on the Patreon, where you should go and subscribe, because it's cool and good. Bye.
It's the one true path to salvation. Bye.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye.